A very, very, very good evening, and for the first time in 2022, welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay, as another year of drinking and celebrating and enjoying wine gets underway. On the back of two rather difficult years, this is a year in which, fingers crossed, we'll see South African wine fly off shelves, both locally and around the world. We'll see the whole wine industry have plenty of fun, and we'll see the world of wine that we love to support on this show flourish and try and claw back some of the ground lost over the last couple of years. And to that end, we're doing quite a bit that's a little new and a little different with Dan Really Likes Wine in 2022. Kicking off early next month, you'll see our weekly recorded show turns into more of a magazine format. Think me as Joanne Strauss in top billing, and you've kind of got where we're headed. And that'll allow us to just show a bit more content, explore a bit more of the wine world, and tell some of the extraordinary stories that seem to tumble into my inbox on an almost daily basis. So excited about that. Excited too about the footprint of our live show, the first of which you are currently watching somewhere in the world, because as well as our website and our YouTube channel and our Facebook page, we're now live on Twitter as well. So we're slowly but surely finding every last corner of the digital landscape and getting out to as many people as we can. And if we're speaking to lots of people, we'd better have some great guests, and we certainly do. We kick off our show with a look ahead to 2022, but also a bit of a look back at 2021. In just a few moments, I'll be joined by Siobhan Thompson, who you've seen many times on the show, the CEO of Wines of South Africa, who'll give us the export report of 2021. How much wine did we sell? What kind of wine did we sell? Where did we sell it? And what does that say about what we might be able to sell and where and of what in 2022? So Siobhan joins us as part of a global cast. Taguzu also joins us, one of the army of Zimbabwean sommeliers taking the world by storm. Pardon now pretty much owns the wine market in Amsterdam, and it is to the Netherlands we will be crossing. We're also dragging Greg Sherwood out of a wine lunch, most reluctantly. I think it's his fourth one of the day. And once we've looked at that export report, which I suspect will suggest that the UK is still our biggest market, we'll get Greg's thoughts on what 2021 said about South African wine sales and what we're looking at for the horizon. And we've got a very special guest making his debut, somebody whose company I've used a number of times. It is a company called Cape Ardor. They operate out of California, distributing a range of wine, but particularly South African wine, and a whole pile of South African wine across most of the United States. We'll find out from Eric how South African wine is doing in America and what the Americans particularly like about the stuff that we produce. But before we do that, a new feature we're adding to the live show, a couple of updates which speak to all of those emails that come flying into my inbox. Let's have a look at some of the latest wine news to hit Dan Really Likes Wine. So first of all, a quick update on this. Now, this is Hidden Valley, and it has just been sold, not to a foreigner with loads of money, but to a South African with loads of money. Patrice Motsepe, owner of Sundowns, owner of the Blue Bulls, owner of African Rainbow Investments and Sanlam, and loads of other South African industries, has decided it's just too difficult to get a table at Overture, and so he's bought Hidden Valley, charming estate just up above Ernie Else in the Helderberg, with Bertus Besson's signature Overture restaurant. I presume that's going to continue as planned. I haven't spoken to Bertus. The news has only broken in the last day or two, but a fine purchase for Patrice Motsepe. So that's some news from Hidden Valley. Also some news from Graham Beck, where Peter Ferreira, after 226 years in charge, has said goodbye as cellar master. He's taking up the role of chief operations officer. I've got no idea what that means, but it does suggest that he will continue to be very heavily involved. And the other man in picture is Pierre de Klerk. Pierre has been with Graham Beck for some time. He takes over as the new chef de cave, to give him his official title. And then some new releases, both in Cape Town and Johannesburg. That is Stuart Botha, the winemaker at Takara, and that's me with him in our matching navy shirts. I was at Marble last week, tasting some new releases from the estate just at the top of the Banhoek Valley. Some great wine. How does it taste? We'll look out for our first recorded episode in February as Stuart and I sit down at Marble and drink some new wine. So there's some news headlines for you from the world of wine. Let's head over to our guest, the CEO of Wines of South Africa, the founder and MD of Cape Ardor, a great Zimbabwean sommelier who now calls Amsterdam home, and one of our most regular guests, the king of South African wine in the UK. It's Siobhan Thompson, Eric Matkovich, Taguzu, and Greg Sherwood. A warm welcome to all of you guys. Happy New Year, if we can still say it at this stage in January. Lovely to have you all on. Eric and Pardon for the first time, Siobhan many times, and Greg we just can't get rid of. He just keeps popping up. Friends we haven't invited either. It's lovely to have you all. Siobhan in particular, very exciting to have you, given your new report has just come out. Give us the synopsis. What were the numbers out of the export report? What does it say about South African wine heading overseas?
Evening, Dan. So what a wonderful way to open your first show of the year. South African wine actually did very well. We started the year and being very apprehensive. We had a lot of challenges during the year, challenges with Cape Town port, freighting, lack of packaging, no glass. So I think the producers were hit by everything. And as you know, local bans as well. So we had a lot of stock available. We forecast to sell probably be about 340 million litres or 350 million litres. And the great news is we ended close to 390 million litres. And for us, that was a great feat. It was a 20% growth, 22% growth actually on 2020. And I think the most pleasing thing is in a year where we had a lot of surplus, so we had producers having to clear out their cellars, having to move certain wine in bulk format, we managed to grow value, and we ended at 10.2 billion rand, which is, thinking back to 2018, which was our last normal year, we sold 420 million rand worth of litres of wine at, I think it was 9.1 billion. So great value growth. But I think in all of that, the most exciting thing are the star children. And it's nice to have Greg on the show because we are so pleased with the progress of the UK. There we saw growth of value of 25%. So we're seeing a completely different mix going into the market when it comes to packaging. So growth of 25% on packaged wine, growth in independents, in specialist stores, higher-end supermarkets. So really pleasing. And then our continent, Africa, we saw Africa really hit hard with the COVID pandemic. And last year, exports dropped right back. And what has happened this year is it's bounced back to pre-2018 levels. And we're seeing really great growth coming through Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique. So some really nice movement there in Africa, seeing that we are part of Africa. And then, of course, China. We can't ignore China and the opportunities with Australian wine, obviously having the tariff issues, and we saw very strong growth coming through there. I think it was about 81% growth on packaged wine, double digits, well, triple digits on bulk wine, but we did expect that. So I think overall very, very positive, and we're very happy. And going into 2022, I'm cautiously optimistic, and I'm hoping we're going to get very close to the 400 million litres, if not back up to 420 where we were in 2018. So thanks to everyone out there who has supported the wine world of South Africa, and also people like Greg on this call. If it wasn't for the people leading the image and helping to put the word out for South Africa, we wouldn't have done this.
Yeah, those are some great numbers, some very uplifting numbers, and I suspect many of us would have been waiting with a little trepidation at these numbers. Gee, another tough year. Will we have done okay? It seems that we've done more than okay. I'd like to unpack the nature of that wine and some of the regions more in a moment. But just for now, first of all, were you surprised by these numbers, and what do you think has driven them?
I don't think I was surprised because I was watching it happen. I was pleased. I think the one thing that did surprise me, particularly on packaged wine, was that we managed to get out as much as we did with all the challenges we had. We couldn't get containers. We couldn't get ships into the harbour. We couldn't get glass. We couldn't get labels. And I think the producers really worked hard to make ways to get that to happen. The most critical thing for us was not to let our suppliers down. And I think we proved we managed to do that, not let them down, put it that way. So yeah, it's for me, it's hard work, and I think it's showing in the results.
A number of people watching at the moment. Skulk Skarpelberg, our Pinotage loving regular. Happy 2022, Dan. Cheers. Plenty of wine to drink this year. Melissa Sutherland wishing us a happy new year. Happy new year to you too, Melissa. May it be full of wonderful, wonderful wine. And then one of the rascallions of the wine world, good friend of mine, Emile Javert, with a question for you there, Siobhan. What is the average price per litre bulk, average price per litre package?
Good try, Emile. I'm not going to put that out there on public forum. Yes, the rand per litre was down on 2020. We expected that, obviously, because we did have a lot of bulk available and the market was trading. I think the pleasing thing on the bulk side, and I'm sort of skirting away from Emile's question, was that South Africa definitely sold more varieties in bulk. So we had the opportunity to sell more Chardonnay, more Sauvignon Blanc, and I think that definitely kept the average price up, which was really positive for South Africa. The interesting fact is if you go back to 2018, you just compare year on year, so 2018's prices on 2021, we at least managed to keep the prices, the price level that we were getting in 2018, if you take the exchange rate into account. So, yeah. Sorry, Emile, I'm not giving you the price per litre, but that will give you a positive message.
If you want some entertainment from the world of wine, Emile Gibert at winegoggle.co.za. Great piece up at the moment on Clem Constantia and Matthew Day's Sauvignon Blancs, but generally a fabulous read from a fabulous writer. I want to bring Greg in just a moment, but quickly before I do that, sketch out for us in particular, Siobhan, the UK market, how that has done over the last 12 months and what sort of shift we might be seeing in terms of South African wine finding a home over there.
Dan, that's actually a very good question. I'd like to go back more than just a year. If we go back probably 5 years ago, the UK market obviously was and still is our biggest trading partner. But we had a situation where we were exporting wine at a lower price per litre. So if you looked at our share for volume, it was far higher than our share for value. And what has happened, I think, over the last 5 years, with the role of Wines of South Africa, the importers, our media, our ambassadors there, is we've managed to migrate South African wine. We've managed to get listings in higher tiers. We've managed to get more value for our money. And the whole picture has started to change for South African wine in the UK. And I think that is what is so pleasing, to the point that if you look at the packaged exports now for this year, we grew by 10% in volume, but we grew by 25% in value. And for me, that's really pleasing. And you can actually see that happening. And that's why I mentioned earlier, and that comes through very strongly in the independents, the specialist trade, and to a certain degree in the higher end multiple grocers. But for me, the UK is such an important center for us for building South Africa's image. We've got most of the important opinion leaders sitting in the UK. And I think that really helped us during the time that we had the 5-week ban and when we had issues with trying to get our wine over, is people remain very positive about South Africa and supporting South Africa. And I think it's because they know we can produce really good quality wine. And we've tried as best as we can to deliver with all the sort of bottlenecks that we're faced with.
Chief amongst those supporters is a man who's either wearing an unwashed London Welsh rugby jersey or Bulls jersey, or is dressed like a member of the lower ranking aristocracy. I suspect it is the latter in this case. Greg Sherwood beats a drum for South African wine like no other across the UK. He's well into his third or fourth wine lunch of the day. He's interrupted it to join us for our first show of 2022. Greg, welcome. Lovely to have you back on the show. Siobhan's given us a look at those 2022 export figures. What's your take on South African wine and how it's done over the last year in light of what Siobhan's given us?
Hi, Dan. I hope you can thumbs up if you can hear me all right. I'm just at one of Kensington's top restaurants. I am with one of South Africa's great talents, Samantha O'Keefe, who's a great supporter and friend of Dan Really Likes Wine. And she's busy giving a tasting, if you can maybe hear some mumblings behind me. And we're just starting to get through some of our great South African producers again to re-engage with the the UK market. And fantastic figures that you've heard from Siobhan, and great work that Joe Waring's doing here with Woza on this side. And I work with her very closely where I can. And, we are very, very, very positive about 2022. I've got a room behind me of about 12 fine wine buyers, merchants, brokers, who have, some of them who you would traditionally not associate with top South African fine wines, who would be more focused on Burgundy or Bordeaux or Rhone or California. And actually, the interest, the focus, the attention is just exceptional. And there's a palpable kind of excitement that this is something everyone has to be part of, regardless of how traditional your private client base is or your retail base is. This is something, South Africa is a fine wine category that you have to get involved with now. It's not a question of if or but, it's must. And of course, some of the people later to the game are going to be struggling a little bit with allocations and things, because our top wines are super sought after now. And from here on in, as I'm sure people in the local market have seen in South Africa, none of the top wines are getting easier to source. But if it's a great position to be in many ways. So I'm very, very excited for 2022. I'm excited to see the guys behind me hanging on Sam's lips about her story, about her wines. We're tasting some incredible wines. We're drinking her 2018 Syrah today with a number of other lovely wines. And it's so encouraging to hear Siobhan's figures, certainly for the kind of bulk and the kind of mainstream. But I can tell you on the fine wine side, it's an inevitability that everything's going to be tighter allocated, everything's going to be even more sought after, and you'll really see people starting to kind of nailing their colors to the mast and say, this is why we are a top South African specialist, or a top this is why our offer is special. And that'll go across, traditional categories of merchants, not just specialists like maybe Handful or something. So it's really exciting to see how the market's going to evolve, going to morph, going to develop. And, backed up by the kind of a very strong, mainstream supermarket category and kind of high street category. So very exciting.
I know that you have lunch to return to, so I won't keep you too long. I do want to ask you one other question, though, about the perception of South African wine. There was a big drive of support South Africa, help us out. We've had a tough time, and the sympathy vote, I think, helped to a degree, but it's not really how we want to be selling our wine. We want to be selling it on the fact that it's great and it's quality and it's fantastic. Are people buying it because of that? Is it still the kind of, it's something a bit different, it's maybe a little bit more expensive? Or has our best wine reached the level where people who can afford to buy a great bottle of Burgundy, but could also have the option of buying a bottle of Hemel Pinot Noir, are going for the Hemel Pinot Noir because both the quality and the perception of that quality has got up there?
Look, it's a two-strand answer. I mean, you've got Samantha behind me, who, when just before the fires, she had just got some of the highest scores for any South African wines from Neil Martin. She was riding the high wave, and then when this kind of fire crisis struck, but it was a classic example of somebody coming from nowhere in a region which had nothing to becoming super established on the map, and while so there are these massive success stories, and hats off to Sam for kind of soldiering through her adversities of the fire, but I think the kind of sympathy vote of the lockdown and all that, it's kind of helped keep South Africa in the forefront of people's minds, and for a certain more mainstream category, it's really kind of said, well, no, let's try the wines, or let's taste the wines, and let's keep buying the wines. But all these little things just feed into a bigger kind of fine wine picture, which is ultimately, from my end of the trade, and a lot of the kind of estates and the top producers which are doing so well in the UK, is they're looking at selling good premium wines at premium prices, and bottled goods, and really kind of carving out a long-term niche. And I think what 2022 we'll look forward to seeing the subsidence of kind of the pandemic kind of narrative. People will start traveling with much more ease, and what that will mean is our top producers and even new producers who have kind of risen in the last 2-3 years, which have been super tough, coming over to the UK and telling their fantastic stories, and reinvigorating and rejuvenating the whole market again. And you can say that would be true of France or Chile or Argentina, but actually, I think our stories are just so much better, so much more exciting, so much more interesting, and the clientele is so much more engaging with our story from South Africa. So it's going to be a great opportunity in 2022 for our quality producers and estates across South Africa to re-engage with the UK market and really kind of carry on that story that was just so engaging before kind of this whole boring COVID thing hit.
And I know you'll be telling that story with as much enthusiasm as ever. Get back to your lunch, give Sam lots of love from Dan Really Likes Wine, and I'm sure we'll have her on the show again soon. And I hope we'll have you back out in South Africa. A great Sherwood master of wine, one great African export to Europe. We've got another one on the show this week as we say goodbye to Greg, and we're welcoming one of my fellow Zimbabweans who finds himself in the Netherlands. Maneru Sekuru Pardon, welcome. Great to have you on the show for the very, very first time. And we're going to get a little bit of background on how you find yourself in the Netherlands in a moment. But let's take the point of departure, first of all, of this export report and this story of South African wine. Give us the Netherlands perspective. How is South African wine doing in Holland?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Dan, for having me on your show. Well, the perspective of South African wines in the Dutch market is quite overwhelming. Especially when it comes to our premium wines, which have found a very good footprint in some of the top restaurants. Throughout the Netherlands, most especially in Michelin style restaurants in Amsterdam. So the perspective has been quite overwhelming with regards to that, and you also have as well the footprint of the not so priced wines which always find their ways to the supermarket. Which are quite preferred other than other regions. So the footprint is quite there. It's quite present, both from B to C and as well as from the HoReCa sector, which is the hospitality. So they are being celebrated quite very well in gastronomy as well.
I often go to a restaurant internationally, and the first thing I'll do is open it up, and I want to see a South African bottle of wine somewhere on the wine list. And I'm always fascinated to see, A, is there one, and B, what is it? If I go to a reasonably good restaurant in Amsterdam, am I likely in most restaurants to find 1 or 2 bottles of South African wine?
Yeah, definitely. You are most likely to get a bottle of South African wine, but my only concern is when it comes to that footprint, you would find mainly, our high-end wines, and you would not find our most accessible priced wines at the same time. So, which means our wines will fall short in terms of increasing volume and traffic in that specific segment of restaurants. But you're likely to find a bottle of South African wine, which is quite highly a high-end wine, not mid-range, which I think more still needs to be done when it comes to the mid-range wines, as well as the entry-level wines as well, which are not just entry-level price-wise, but they also have, they're very good quality, they're positioned very well in terms of pricing and their quality as well. So that's what I think, and that's what I see in this market at the moment.
What is the wine of choice in Amsterdam? What would most people be drinking? Is there a preference to red or white, to a particular varietal?
There is definitely a preference, especially when it comes to the European market. There's preference of white more than reds. Reds are trailing behind a little bit because you really have to sell them. If you are in a restaurant, you are somewhere, or you are a trader, you have a little bit less traffic from reds. Whites are always preferred, and South Africa is well known for making it fantastic Chenin Blancs. From Stellenbosch to Swartland, they're quite celebrated as well. And also the pinotage as well. It's also finding its way as well. As it's the traditional grape from South Africa, which we do actually make, and we are so proud of it. So you would have the preference would be more whites, more leaning towards to Chenin Blanc. If not, you'd get some of our Cape Mediterranean blends as well. They're also coming in between, and then you have the pinotage, which also comes in as well. But overall, the whites are more preferred than reds.
I want to come back to you in just a second, Bart, and also tell a bit about your story and how you find yourself over in the Netherlands. Grant Sauls is watching on YouTube. Good to have the show back. Looking forward to a great year of wine and learning more. Great lineup to kick the show off. Thanks, Grant, and good to have you with us. Reginald Peckmay up at Cheetah Plains in the Sabi Sands. Compliments the new season to Dan, team, and our lovely guests. This is a year we're going to sell everything to the world except our wine culture. I'm exhilarated. I think you generally are exhilarated, Reggie. Lovely to have you with us. And Angela Lloyd, doyen of our wine industry. How are wines selling in can on export? We'll find out from Siobhan in a second. But first of all, let's go not to San Francisco, where we might have not that long ago, but instead to Franschhoek, which is where we find Eric Matkovich, who is founder and managing director of Cape Ardor, a website I've used many, many times, and a website whose background and story, much like Pardon's, we'll hear in a moment. But let's start with that export story and wines finding home around the world from South Africa. Eric, in light of Siobhan giving us some numbers, giving us a look back at 2021, what's the broad stroke of the South African wine scene in America, and how do you feel we're doing?
Right. So thanks for having me on the show first. So 2021 is an interesting year for the U.S. If you look at kind of like macro things going on with the COVID situation, at the end of, say, December of 2020, the vaccine started to roll out. And what we saw was the on-trade and off-trade situation, I should say more the on-trade, were starting to open up within the U.S. And so we saw a bit of a shift, to people getting out and about. Now, I can only comment really to, our focus, which is trying to bring in, more premium wines from South Africa and focusing on, not the general or regular import and distribution channels. And what we've seen consistently is 2020 was a great build for us on people going in online and being more experimental within the category. And then also that kind of locked in some, I would say, loyalty to brands and also to the category as a broader whole. So getting into 2021, we saw a lot of these customers coming back multiple times, more comfortable with it. But fundamental to our business and throughout all the starts and stops has been really making sure that the supply chain is there and making sure that you can deliver the products as painlessly as possible and removing like as many roadblocks as possible. And so we were able to do that in 2020. Luckily, we were set up in a lot of ways, not in anticipation of the pandemic, but just really in seeing that that's where we thought, things would go. In our view, we've seen, like I said, a confidence that's been built up in a broader base. And what's most encouraging to us is the influx of consumers that have not been to South Africa, coming in and trying the category, getting used to it, asking questions, wanting more hands-on, kind of guides through the online experience, through chat, through picking up the phone and calling and asking for recommendations and really trying to explore and understand the category. And to that point, we've seen really an uptick on the upper limit of where people will spend on wines. We've had some pinotages going in excess of $240 a bottle, and there's people out there for that market. So that kind of thing is encouraging.
When I jump onto your website, if I can remember the first time I did so, I was very pleasantly surprised because it wasn't the half a dozen familiar faces I was expecting. You have a vast array of South African wine. You've also got wine from places like Australia and New Zealand, and that's competing with traditional wine from Europe and of course wine from America. And so there are so many other people trying to find the same person to get that wine too. Why is South African wine in a space where somebody like Cape Ardor is able to supply as much wine as you do across such a wide range to so many people? How are we able to do that in the face of so much competition from both American wine and wine from the rest of the world in the US market?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there's the U.S. in general. I think as a culture is open to exploring brands, but then with that, we've also got probably a highly regulated and unregulated situation in the sense that anybody can get into the wine industry or the liquor industry, import products and expose them. So, our average, grocery store that you can go to can have in excess of 200, 300, 400 labels on the shelves. And those typically will represent all areas. So, even living in San Francisco with Napa, in our backyard, the desire to explore new sources and new countries and new regions and stuff like that is kind of imprinted in the DNA, I'd say, of the culture. With us personally, we built a model that allows us to be agile and allows us to bring in much smaller quantities of premium products to allow people to get access to what I would consider the more the ones that show the real depth of capability within South African blueprint. And for our portfolio, we're still roughly 92% South African compared to the newer regions. But it's part of our endeavors to allow wineries to get access to the markets where people want the wines. And oftentimes, we know there's a series of gatekeepers that allow product in just in order of the economics of getting a product to market. And so that allows us to allow, some of these winemakers and some of the productions that are smaller quantities to actually make access to these where they've been exposed to them, coming down to this market, being able to actually find those things once being introduced. Then it becomes, an ongoing sale and ongoing commitment to the brand. So that's a big piece of what we see as a longer term play for brand growth.
It seems an appropriate time to let you know what I'm drinking this evening, which is a glass of red. In fact, it's a glass of the Ernie Els Proprietors Blend from 2016. And there are a couple of reasons for that. 2016 was the year Dan Really Likes Wine kicked off. It is a 5-star platter wine from a vintage that tends to get a little less attention than the 15 and 17 either side of it out of Stellenbosch. But it's also, Eric, a wine that I drank at a wine bar in LA that a mate of mine owns in Santa Monica. And it's also a wine I didn't drink but saw at a wine bar on Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco, which on both occasions I was pleasantly surprised to find some South African wine sitting in America. We heard from Pardon a second ago that the Dutch prefer their whites, and that has a big footprint in the Netherlands. When we think of homegrown American wine, it's big reds and woody Chardonnays from California and some Pinot Noir from Oregon, and those are kind of the perceptions we have in the rest of the world. It's obviously a bit more complex than that. What are Americans leaning towards when it comes to finding favor with South African wine?
Yeah, so what I've been finding interesting is from the red side, the Bordeaux style blends are doing well, and they also compete really well against the California wines. It's still, when we first started our business in 2008, couldn't have been a worse time. We capitalized on quality value South Africa. That was kind of the point, because everybody still wanted to drink wine, and actually consumption never goes down in a crisis. But people want to drink a better quality and try and hit those points. And South Africa still plays, really well into that space. And one of the points that I get to is that, for probably half the price on the shelf, you could be drinking a better wine than many, significant Napa wines. So that's one. Obviously, Shiraz, Pinotage, and premium Pinotages have been making some interesting growth within the company. And then, of course, the Shennons and the more, I would say, complicated, food quality wines is really where we're seeing it. So we've seen some, interesting shift in, I would say, the sales percentages. And so we've seen probably about a 4 or 5% shift towards whites to reds, but red still dominates as of 2021 at about 50%, 56%, and about 32% in white wines. So, there's some interesting shifts towards that. And I think we're also doing a lot in terms of our online education and trying to, get people to look at the more, complicated blends and where things have been put together, and then looking at regional differences. So we saw some really, good uptake on curated packs that had a story around it, that had, explore this, explore the Shenans of these different regions, or explain, do a horizontal of cabs from around different regions of South Africa, that kind of thing. So people have that curiosity, and it's interesting to see those guys subscribe into it. And we're just going to continue to find interesting ways to allow folks to explore the category more.
I suspect that at the moment there is a lady in Stellenbosch sitting at her desk scribbling notes furiously as she tweaks her plans for Woza USA. Siobhan, the American market, it is a complicated one, and state to state there are challenges, but from what Eric says, there's clearly a more than healthy appetite for South African wine in America, and an appetite across the board, both value and varietal. How is America fitting in to the South African wine puzzle from your perspective, from your strategy, and what's 2022 looking like there?
I think, Dan, just to put in context, USA is currently our 4th biggest market, so for exports, and it was, I think, a few years ago 6th or 7th, so it definitely has moved up. And one thing has always been very positive about the US is the pricing structure. So we've always had good tiered wines, and we've always got good prices for them. And as outlined by Eric, we do find that people want to explore South African wine, and once we've got them in, they really hook into it and then look for different sort of avenues. So for us, it is an important market, is a complex market. So we focus in various states only. But I think that the positivity of it is that we're seeing that value growth continuing. And, I was looking at the Gomberg stats, which are internal stats of imports into the US. And from January to October, even though our exports were pretty flat for this year. We grew at about 2 to 3%, depending on what you look at, value or volume. The internal imports showed us growing at 18%, which means the market did contract. But obviously our value of that and our volume of that grew in terms of share-wise. So that for me was very positive. And I think one of the other positive aspects of the USA is we're getting more and more tourists coming to South Africa. And, when we were slapped onto the red list in November, December, we were mortified. But what I did see is the minute there was a little bit of opening of leeway, so once they dropped that, there were a lot of Americans coming to Cape Town, and we're seeing more and more of them in the winelands. So that exploration, that sense of adventure is definitely coming through. And it's great to hear Eric talk about Chenin, how they're exploring Chenin on regionality, and also Pinotage coming through. So Chenin for us has definitely been a big win in the US. Which is so pleasing to hear it being spoken about as well.
I can't believe Ina Smith hasn't commented yet, but if she's not watching, she'll definitely get wind of that very shortly indeed. Before I jump back to the Netherlands, Angela Lloyd's question from a moment ago, how are wines in cans selling on export? Are they starting to have any kind of impact?
I think that they're very small still. And I think there's one USA producer who does cans, Labanzi, and they seem to be doing very well with it. But the market intelligence that we're picking up is that the ready to drink market is definitely growing, and that really affords an opportunity for cans to grow, particularly in the younger generation. Our stats are not showing anything in terms of huge growth right now, but I think it is something that will happen in the future, but it will appeal to a certain sort of target market. It's not going to be your connoisseurs. It's going to be your younger, trendier people who want convenience, and they're not looking for, super premium quality wines.
We export wine in all manners. We also export plenty of wine expertise, which brings me back to Pardon in the Netherlands. Pardon, just give us the story, very quickly, how you got into wine and how a Zimbabwean finds himself in the Netherlands talking the people of Holland through the world of wine.
Yeah, well, yeah, for me, I got into wine. I don't come from a wine background family. First of all, my background actually before I got into wine was actually economics and sports psychology. But just like any other young Zimbabwean, during the 2006 to 2008, was fleeing the country because of economic hardships at that time. I found myself as well being also one of those young people who are quite wanting to look for greener pastures. And then I actually traveled to Cape Town where my sister was, and started off working in hospitality there because I could not actually get any job in any sector that I was qualified for, as it was a long process to actually for the government to reassess your qualifications, and still you could not get the job at that time. And I was coming from a point I was like, okay, I need to look after my mother, because I was raised by a single mother. So my sister at that time was staying in Ruby Castile, which is just about 85 kilometers away from the city center. And it was during the Olive Festival. I remember vividly because I got a job as a runner at the Royal Hotel. So basically running with plates from from the kitchen and putting them on the table. But during that time, I got just fascinated about the colleagues of mine that I had joined that were talking about wine. And for me, it seemed unreal what they were talking about, and I got fascinated, and I got curious. I started looking up into courses, what can I do actually to also get into wine. And then I found myself subscribing to the Cape Wine Academy, and also the WSCT as well with Kathy Marston. And I remember vividly I used to travel from Ruby Castile by train to Stellenbosch, which you needed actually to leave Ruby Castile at 5 a.m. For a lecture which was going at Overture restaurant at 10 o'clock. So that was quite interesting, traveling in with the train. Always takes long, and then you also have to return as well. But the train, it moves with its timetable. After that, I actually went from being a runner, being a barman, waiter as well, and then I left the hotel, and then I became a wine steward at Mama Cucina, which was an Italian pizzeria in Ruby Castile as well. And I created my first wine list then, which was quite a challenge for me. But I was quite friends with a lot of producers in Swartland, the likes of Eben, the likes of Adi Baranost, and also the young guns as well, like Ryan Mostart as well as Samantha as well. So I really got the grips of the Swartland region, which is still my beloved region and preferred region as well, especially when it comes to Chenin Blancs. And then after that, I got headhunted from Cape Town, from Aubergine Restaurant, and then I started my journey there as an assistant sommelier, and then became one of the best young sommeliers for South Africa 2017. And then I also participated as well in the World Blind Tasting Championship after I was top 5 best testers in South Africa in 2017 as well at the same time. So everything was happening pretty much fast. I was, putting my time into into studying and also putting my time into practicing, tasting wines, trying to learn everything I could all the time. And then after that, I was, I've always had the passion to excel. So I was never going to stay on the floor for a long time. So I was so much interested into actually getting into distribution. And then an opportunity came when I met my then business partners, and which I actually expressed my willingness to actually move my game up a little bit and do distribution of South African wines in the EU. Which I did then successfully. I started a company in the Netherlands, which had the focus on importing the very small brands, brands that have a story to tell, and brands that really people of color in wine, women in wine, and the wines that are not well represented out there, because I will always want to stand in front and actually introduce new stuff to the market, be it any other market. So that's how I actually ended up in the Netherlands, and then now I'm also running my own distribution, which is 100% African owned, and also 100% 100% operational, mainly in Amsterdam, as well as also the other neighboring cities as well for now. But with the aim actually to grow a little bit more, because I'm actually recognizing quite a lot of growth in terms of the love of South African wines in this market as well.
It's a remarkable story. We're going to have you back on the show again, pardon, because there's still so much to tell. How a kid from the Honda Valley manages to find himself in Amsterdam and bringing in all those African wines. And I love the restaurant to the Royal Hotel. I think it was Joseph Dafana came through the Royal Hotel, and Rebecca Steele as well. And this Zimbabwean sommelier story. There's the movie as well. So we'll have to have you back on again soon to chat some more. But before we wrap up the show, you've got a great wine distribution story. Eric's got one as well. Eric, explain to us your wine background, how Cape Ardor comes about, and how you now have this business bringing so much fine South African wine to an American market. I think we got you on mute there, Eric.
Sorry, I thought you were controlling that. It's an interesting story. That 15 years ago, if you asked me, would you be living in South Africa, and working in the wine industry, it was not on my trajectory or radar at any way. But as it goes, I met my wife from Durban in San Francisco, and part of that was, experiencing restaurants and whatnot, which we. After my first trip down here, my first trip through the winelands, and saw the incredible beauty having Napa in our backyard all the time. I just said, I can't believe what's here and what is not over there. And so we kind of made it a mission to tie our lives together to make sure there was a reason to always come back and spend some significant time here, by starting an import business and not really knowing what we were doing. From that, we got a real harsh reality of what how competitive and aggressive the trade business is within San Francisco and within the Bay Area. But my other background was in Silicon Valley and doing software product management, kind of solving creating solutions, for problems, and trying to kind of fix consumer oriented services with service provider segment. That said, we effectively came down here, started a business, and were able to talk some very early adopters into taking a chance on us. And with that, we just went out hat in hand and worked the markets within San Francisco. Within a short period of time, we realized that this was going to be difficult. This was a downturn down in the U.S. and worldwide, really a global financial downturn. And what we did notice is that people who had been traveling were hitting us up, because part of that is we had started a website along with it, with the ability to do some very initial brands. One was Cabriere, one was Dimos Fontaine, La Petite Ferme, Rocca, Iona. So one of the early adopters, and people came across these wines and would be reaching out to us saying, "Hey, is there any way you can get this stuff to us?" And so we started to explore that a little bit more. And our model, emerged, or I should say evolved, into recognizing that it's very difficult to tell the story of somebody that hasn't been down here, but somebody who's been down here is converted, because they get their first introductions, potentially on the game farms, and then they make their way down into Cape Town, and it's in the restaurants, and the exposure to South African wine is formidable, because if you happen to find import wines down here, it's exponentially more expensive. And not to mention, the quality that may be coming into the country is more, for trade, as opposed to, individual DTC level wines. So that said, we started to explore that more and more. And fast forward, a couple of crises and a pandemic further, we found ourselves down here. We work with about 50 wineries in developing their DTC plans. And to the point that was brought up earlier, is that we truly believe that the international tourism is one of the best marketing tools and brand building tools that needs to be pushed even further. There's a lot of opportunity sitting out there. There's still a lot of disconnection from how to utilize that market and grow it and maximize its value, because, like I said, once you've been down here, you're converted. These winelands have been now to several regions throughout the world, and this is first class down here, and you guys have a lot to be proud of. And it's also how I'm landing in Franschhoek, and I'm here for an undetermined amount of time, but I'm enjoying it very much and getting to know the wineries, the winemakers, everybody in more detail as we making our life down here.
Swapping the Golden Gate Bridge for the Huguenot Monument. It's a rather natural segue, but you look like you're quite happy there. Very quickly, just before I jump back to Siobhan, and pardon for one last word from each of you, in 30 seconds, your prediction: South African wine in the American market in 2022. Are we looking at it optimistically? And what do you think that the key markers are going to be for South African wine the year ahead in the States?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very optimistic about it. We have to get a consistent. The supply chain has to be sorted out, but with some planning that can work. I mean, you can honestly see that is an impact to sales. So at the ports here and all the way the routes and the ports, the consolidation that has happened is extending lead times, but as long as product is there, I think there's uptick. And then the tourism market, again, there is such a dramatic upside to that, because the tourists that are coming down now are spending dramatically more. The average order values have gone up, nearly 50-60%. So I'm very optimistic, as long as we don't shoot ourselves in the foot. Let's put it that way.
I'm glad to hear it. I think we'll be all right there, and it's nice to hear that the American market is so fond of South African wine, as the Dutch market seems to be. Pardon, your sense, 2022, a good year for South African wine in the Netherlands, and what in particular do you think is going to give us a head start over wine from other parts of the world?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting as opposed to a value. If you look at an average Burgundy here, it would be costing 2 times or 3 times an average Chardonnay from South Africa, which the clientele is likely to utilize on that, and also because of how the development of the clientele is actually developing in terms of trust of the brands from South Africa. So I think that could be quite interesting, and we also have an influx of Dutch people actually visiting South Africa, and also now with the reluctance of the COVID rules, I think the more people travel to South Africa, they're actually going to give us also a start when they come back here, expose South African, more South African wines. So yeah, basically, I think in terms of price, quality, and value, more.
I think we just breaking up a touch there, but we get the sense a combination of quality and value, which really is South Africa's hallmark. Pardon us, you might be getting rather a lot of phone calls and emails from South African winemakers looking to get into your good books and send some wine the way of Netherlands through your distribution company. Final one, Siobhan, 2022 has so much for you. Cape Wine towards the end of the year, which we're really excited about supporting. But throughout the whole year, wine finding new homes, renewing an acquaintance with old homes. I know you've got some, I think some Sauvignon Blanc or some in your glass at the moment, which has been one of the big success stories of the last year. What's leading the charge for you, and what's really important for South African wine, for the South African wine story for 2022?
I think, Dan, the most important story for 2022 is the Cape Wine story, which is about sustainability. So it's the three pillars. It's people, it's place, and it's prosperity. And that's the story we're going to be telling very strongly this year. And we're going to be welcoming those tourists here. We're going to be welcoming consumers as well as trade. So to get as many people to South Africa, business-wise or pleasure-wise, and get them into South African wine. And hopefully, as Eric outlined, if we can overcome the supply chain issues, that would be fantastic. So I'm very positive, and I think we should all celebrate with a glass of wine. And as you said, my choice is the Sauvignon Blanc with a little bit of Semillon in it, just to celebrate our Sauvignon Blanc successes for last year.
It leads to another question that we'll ask another time, which is whether we're almost a victim of our own success and that we do so much wine so well. Do we need to be focusing a bit more? There's so much we could talk about with all of our guests, but it does wrap us up now on a positive note, because 2021, despite some challenges, has been so good. And Siobhan, you and your team at Woes have been a huge part of that. So thank you, and I look forward to many more conversations in the build-up to Cape Wine, which takes place later on this year. A big thank you to Eric. If you've got friends in America and you want to send them something, jump onto capeardor.com. It's cape-ardor.com. It's a website. Even if you're not sending wine, it's just loads of fun to muck about on for an hour and waste time when you're supposed to be doing some work. Just don't convert the dollars to rand. It's slightly depressing. Everything else, though, is absolutely fantastic. And Pardon's story in the Netherlands, part of that great Zimbabwean sommelier story that just keeps getting bigger and bigger and better. Siobhan, Eric, Pardon, thank you all so much for joining us. Eric, look forward to a glass or two with you down in Franschhoek in the near future. Siobhan, we have many glasses in store this year. And Pardon, as travel allows, I'm definitely due a return to Amsterdam. My good friend Ruud Gullet's got some golf lined up for me, so I'll bring him around for some wine while we're there. To all of you, and to Greg Sherwood, who's probably been carried out of his restaurant by now, thank you all for joining me so much today. Really do appreciate it. And lovely having you on. Our CEO of Woes is Siobhan Thompson. Pardon Taguzu from the Honda Valley and now of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and Eric Matkovich from Cape Ardor, plus Greg Sherwood. Guys, thank you all very much for joining us in the very first episode of 2022.
Thanks, Dan.
Cheers.
So looking ahead, what do we have to coming up? Well, on Thursday, there's a brand new team running the Cape Winemakers Guild. Gordon Newton-Johnson is the man in charge. He's the new chairman. That's him with the rolled up sleeves and the dashing navy shirt. Erica Obermeyer is beside him. She is a new member. So too is Alex Starry. He's in the lumberjack shirt. And then Richard Kershaw also in the front there. And they will be joining us on the show on Thursday. Not only them, though, because what's really exciting about the Cape Winemakers Guild, and probably my favorite thing about the whole Cape Winemakers Guild, is that they've got their protégés, and Mosima Mabelele will also be joining us on the show, young winemaker in her first year as part of the Guild. And throw forward to next Monday, we'll be catching up with celebrity chef Pete Goff-Wood, along with wine drinker extraordinaire Sibongile Mafu from KFM, does a lot of wine work, plus 20 Price from the Black Cellar Club, and winemaker Duncan Savage. They've been off to Pick and Pay armed with 150 Rand to buy 2 bottles of wine, 1 red, 1 white. What can they get as they stretch their last few rands till the end of January? That does it for the show for this evening. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being part of Dan Really Likes Wine. Thanks for our terrific guests for being with us on the show this evening. We'll see you on Thursday. Happy drinking from Dan Really Likes Wine. Goodbye. To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.